The cold Alpha King wanted no mate, until a poor Omega stirred his wolf wild. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, the title of our story is The Cold Alpha King Wanted No Mate, until a poor Omega stirred his wolf wild. I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into today's story. What happens when a cold, ruthless Alpha King, who wants nothing to do with a mate, meets a poor, powerless Omega who unexpectedly changes everything? Let's find out together. Let's turn back to the main character, Selene, a young Omega living in the outskirts of the kingdom, far from the glimmering palace and its royal intrigues. For years, she had lived a life of rejection, overlooked and belittled by everyone around her. Being born Omega in a world ruled by powerful alphas was never easy, and Selene had learned early on that survival meant staying invisible. But even as she carried out the menial tasks in her small village, she never lost the glimmer of kindness in her heart. She believed in fate and hoped that someday, something extraordinary might happen. Little did she know, fate was about to come knocking. One cold evening, while walking through the woods near her village, Selene stumbled upon a man lying unconscious in the snow, his body covered in deep, fresh wounds. His clothing, though ragged, hinted at something far beyond the ordinary. She knelt beside him, her heart racing. Her instinct told her to help, so she gently touched his face, trying to wake him up. She was no healer, but she knew enough to help someone in need. She tore part of her own coat to wrap his wounds, her hands trembling as she worked. Suddenly, the man's eyes shot open, glowing a fierce golden hue. For a moment, he just stared at her, his breath shallow. Then, with surprising strength, he lifted his head, staring at her with a piercing gaze. "Who are you?" he rasped, his voice low but full of authority. Selene hesitated, but something about the man's presence felt different. His energy was commanding yet strangely familiar. "I'm just an ordinary Omega," she stammered, her heart pounding in her chest. The man smirked, though it was more of a shadow of amusement than anything else. "I am King Orin, but I'm no longer the man I once was. I've been cursed." His voice softened as he spoke, but the weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Selene helped him to his feet, her hands still trembling. She had never encountered anyone so powerful, so broken. He didn't seem like a king to her, just a man who had been lost in the wilderness, waiting for someone to save him. She felt an unexpected surge of compassion. As they made their way back to her village, she couldn't shake the feeling that their meeting wasn't just coincidence. And soon she'd find out just how much her life was about to change. But what Selene didn't know was that Orin's curse was far from over. The deeper they got into the village, the more she felt the tension in the air. His curse was tied to his soul, and Selene's touch had somehow started the process of healing. But not just any healing, her touch stirred something deep inside of him, something wild, something that was slowly breaking free. What was once a cold Alpha King now felt the stirrings of something he had buried deep inside. His wolf, hungry for the Omega who had touched his soul. She didn't realize it, but Selene had just awakened a force inside of him that would change their lives forever. As Selene helped King Orin back to her small cottage, she could feel the weight of the moment. The cold night air nipped at her skin, but it was nothing compared to the strange warmth spreading through her chest. She had never thought much about fate, but tonight, it felt as though the threads of her life had twisted in ways she couldn't fully understand. Orin, though physically weakened, was unlike anyone she had ever met. His presence alone was enough to make the very air around them feel charged, as though something immense was about to happen. As they reached the door to her cottage, Selene hesitated, glancing up at the king. His eyes, still glowing faintly, met hers. "I owe you my life, Selene," he said, his voice gravelly yet soft. His words felt heavy, almost like a promise. "You didn't have to help me." She shook her head, not knowing how to respond. She had only done what seemed right. "Everyone deserves a chance," she said quietly, opening the door and ushering him inside. The warmth of the fire in the hearth immediately hit them, and Orin breathed a sigh of relief, his tense posture relaxing slightly. Selene quickly tended to the fire, adding more wood, before she knelt beside him. You should rest, she urged gently. You've been through a lot. Orin leaned back against the wall, his eyes narrowing as though he were trying to keep something at bay. I haven't been able to rest for years, he murmured, his voice filled with a quiet sadness. Not since the curse. The one that turns me into the beast you saw earlier. Selene's breath caught in her throat. She had seen glimpses of his true nature when his eyes had glowed with an unsettling golden light, but she hadn't fully understood what it meant. She moved to sit beside him, her curiosity getting the better of her. Tell me about the curse, she said softly, unsure if she was overstepping. Orin was silent for a moment, and for the first time since she had met him, Selene saw a flicker of vulnerability in his eyes. It was placed on me by a dark sorcerer who wished to control my power, he began, his tone distant, as if reliving painful memories. The sorcerer knew that I was a king, a ruler with the blood of both Alpha and Omega running through my veins. He believed that if he could bind me with a curse, I would become nothing more than a wild animal, an uncontrollable force. Selene's heart ached for him, the sorrow in his voice touching something deep within her. And it worked? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Orin nodded, his jaw tightening. For years I've been fighting it. At times the beast takes over and I lose control. It's like I'm trapped in my own body, unable to stop the destruction it causes. But there are moments like now, when I can feel the grip of the curse loosening. And it's because of you. Selene blinked, confused. Because of me? Orin turned to face her, his expression intense. Yes, your touch, it awakened something inside me. It's like your kindness, your healing energy, is breaking the chains of the curse, piece by piece. Selene's mind raced as she tried to comprehend his words. She had never thought of herself as special, just an ordinary Omega in a world of alphas. But now with Orin's words, everything felt different. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, and it made her heart race. I don't know how I'm doing this, she admitted, her voice trembling. I don't have any special powers. I'm just trying to help. Orin smiled faintly, a small spark of admiration in his eyes. You don't need special powers to be extraordinary, Selene. Your heart is enough. For a moment, the silence between them was comfortable, filled only by the crackling of the fire. But then the quiet was broken by a low growl that seemed to come from deep within Orin's chest. He gritted his teeth, his body tensing once more. The beast, it's getting stronger, he muttered almost to himself. I can feel it fighting to take over. I need to leave before it's too late. Selene's heart skipped a beat. No, she said quickly, her voice firm. You don't have to go. You're not alone anymore. You don't have to face this curse by yourself. Orin's eyes widened in surprise. You would help me? He asked, his voice full of disbelief. Selene nodded, her gaze unwavering. You helped me when I needed it most. Now it's my turn. For the first time since their meeting, Orin looked at her with something resembling hope. You're willing to help me fight this curse? He asked. Selene smiled softly, placing her hand over his. Yes. We'll fight it together. As the fire burned brightly in front of them, the bond between them grew stronger, not just as Alpha and Omega, but as two souls who had found each other in a world full of darkness. But little did Selene know, the journey ahead would be filled with danger, betrayal, and a power that would change both their fates forever. As Selene and King Orin sat in the warmth of the cottage, their conversation drifted into a silence filled only by the crackling of the fire. Orin had explained the curse that haunted him, and Selene couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency rising within her. She had promised to help him, but she wasn't sure where to start. She wasn't a healer, and she had no knowledge of the magic that bound him. All she had was her resolve, and that had to be enough. Orin, sensing her unease, gave her a soft, reassuring smile. I don't know how you do it, Selene. You've already helped me more than anyone ever has. Just your presence calms the beast inside me, he said quietly, his voice laced with gratitude. Selene met his gaze, feeling the weight of his words. It was hard for her to imagine that someone as powerful as him, someone who had ruled kingdoms and fought battles, could feel so vulnerable. I wish I could do more, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I don't know how to break this curse. I don't have any magic, I'm just... She trailed off, unsure how to finish her sentence. Orin's eyes softened as he reached out, taking her hand in his. You don't need magic, Selene. What you have is enough. It's your heart, your compassion, that is breaking the curse. She looked at him uncertain, but he continued, his voice strong and steady. The curse was designed to turn me into a monster, a beast ruled by rage. It feeds on the darkness in me, but it can't touch the light you bring. Every time you're near me it weakens and I can feel it. I've never felt anything like this before. His words sent a shiver through her, a mix of fear and wonder at the power she didn't even know she possessed. Selene felt something stir within her, something deep and primal. She wasn't just helping him. She was fighting alongside him, and in that moment she understood that her role in this was more than just a healer. She was his partner, his equal. We'll find a way to break it, she said, more to herself than to him. Together. Orin nodded, but his face darkened slightly. There are others who will try to stop us. They see the curse as a weapon, and they won't give it up easily. My enemies know what I've become, and they'll do whatever it takes to keep me under their control. Selene's heart skipped a beat at the thought of the dangers that awaited them. She had no illusions about the world they lived in. Power, betrayal, and darkness were everywhere. What can we do? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. We fight back, Orin replied firmly, his jaw set with determination. We fight back with everything we have. But we can't do it alone. Just then a knock echoed through the door, pulling them both from their thoughts. Selene looked up, startled, as Orin tensed beside her. Stay here, he whispered, his voice low and controlled. He stood up quickly, moving to the door with the grace of someone who had seen battle. Selene felt a flutter of anxiety in her chest as she watched him, but she didn't argue. Orin opened the door slowly, revealing a figure standing in the shadow of the doorway. The person was cloaked, their face hidden, but the presence was unmistakable. Selene's breath caught in her throat as the figure stepped forward. I bring news, the cloaked figure said, their voice muffled by the fabric. It's about the curse. We know how to break it. Orin's eyes narrowed. Who are you? He demanded. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a woman with dark hair and piercing green eyes. I'm someone who knows the truth about your curse, she said, her gaze flicking to Selene before returning to Orin. And I can help you if you're willing to trust me. Selene felt a surge of suspicion, but Orin's expression softened, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I don't trust easily, Orin said, his voice low. But if what you say is true, then we'll listen. We don't have much time. The woman nodded, pulling back her cloak to reveal a small, worn book in her hand. This book holds the key to the curse, she said, her voice urgent. But there's more. The price for breaking it is high, and you must be prepared for what's to come. Orin and Selene exchanged a look, both feeling the weight of the decision before them. What price? Selene asked, her heart racing. The woman's eyes darkened. The price of breaking the curse is your bond with each other. If you go through with this, you will be bound together in a way that cannot be undone. You will be forced to face the darkest parts of yourselves, and only then will the curse be broken. Do you understand? Orin stood silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the book in the woman's hands. Finally he spoke, his voice steady but filled with resolve. We'll do it. Together. The woman nodded, a shadow of approval in her eyes. Then prepare yourselves. The journey ahead will be the hardest you've ever faced. With those words the woman turned and walked away, leaving Orin and Selene to face the unknown together. As the door closed behind her, the weight of their decision hung heavy in the air. They had chosen their path, and now there was no turning back. The following morning Selene and Orin stood at the edge of the forest, the wind biting through the trees as they prepared to leave the safety of her cottage behind. The woman with the book had given them little time to prepare, urging them to move quickly if they were to have any hope of breaking the curse. Orin, despite the solemnity of the task ahead, felt a strange sense of purpose rising within him. For the first time in years he wasn't simply running from his past. He was moving toward a future, one that could possibly be free from the beast that had plagued him for so long. Are you sure you're ready for this? Selene asked, her voice soft but steady as she adjusted the straps on her bag. Orin turned to face her, his expression unreadable but filled with determination. "I don't have a choice anymore, Selene," he said quietly, his voice filled with resolve. "I've spent too long running from this curse from what I am. If this is the only way to break it, then I'll face whatever comes." Selene nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of what they were about to do. She had never been one for adventure or danger, but now, standing beside Orin, she felt a strength inside herself that she had never known. She had made her choice. She would stand by him no matter what. The journey ahead would not be easy, and the dangers they faced would be many, but she couldn't turn back now. "Then we face it together," she said firmly, meeting his gaze. Orin gave her a small smile, his eyes softening for a moment before his expression became serious again. "Together," he agreed. The two of them set off into the woods, the path ahead uncertain but clear in its purpose. Hours passed as they made their way through the dense forest, the air growing colder as they ventured deeper. Selene kept a watchful eye on Orin, who seemed more tense with each step, as if he were preparing for something he couldn't control. It wasn't long before they reached the clearing, where the woman had told them to meet. A circle of ancient stones stood in the center, worn smooth by the passage of time. The air here felt different, charged with a strange energy that made Selene's skin tingle. Orin stepped forward, his hand resting on one of the stones, and Selene could feel the power radiating from him. It was as though the curse itself were waiting for them to arrive, watching, anticipating. "This is it," Orin murmured, his voice low and full of reverence. "This is where the ritual begins." Selene stepped forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know what to expect, only that the woman had warned them that the ritual would test everything they had. Mentally, emotionally, and physically. The price they would pay for breaking the curse was not just their bond but everything they had known about themselves. Orin turned to face her, his expression softening. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice almost gentle. Selene looked at him, her gaze steady. "I'm ready," she said, her voice filled with conviction. Orin nodded, his eyes darkening as he stepped into the center of the stone circle. Selene followed him, her heart racing as she stood beside him. The air grew colder still, and the world around them seemed to hold its breath. Without warning, Orin's eyes flashed with a golden light, and Selene felt the ground beneath her feet tremble. The curse was awakening, the beast inside him stirring. Orin's body began to shift, his form twisting as the wolf within him fought to break free. Selene reached out, her hand resting on his arm as she tried to ground him, to remind him that he wasn't alone. "Stay with me, Orin," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We can do this together." Orin's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, the wildness in them seemed to recede. He nodded, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "I'm trying, Selene," he said, his voice strained. "But it's getting harder to hold it back." Selene's heart clenched as she felt the power of the curse growing stronger, threatening to tear them apart. She knew that if they were to succeed, they would have to face the beast within him together. With a deep breath, Selene closed her eyes and focused on the bond they had forged. She could feel Orin's struggle, his fear, his anger, and the deep primal force that fought to take control. But she also felt something else, their connection, the strength that they had found in each other. She wasn't just helping him. She was part of him now, and he was part of her. "We're stronger than this," she said softly, her voice filled with the belief she hadn't known she had until now. Orin's golden eyes softened, and for the first time he smiled. A small fleeting smile, but it was enough. "You're right," he whispered, his body beginning to stabilize. Together they could face anything. As the energy of the ritual surged around them, Selene and Orin held onto each other, their hearts beating in unison, ready to break the curse and face whatever challenges lay ahead. But the journey was far from over, and the path to freedom would test them in ways they never expected. The ritual had begun, but Selene could feel the world around her slipping into chaos. As Orin's transformation continued, the air grew thick with tension, the ground beneath them trembling as though the very earth itself were being torn apart. Orin's golden eyes flickered with fury, his body contorting as the beast within him fought for control. "Selene!" Orin's voice was strained, filled with a deep guttural growl, as though something primal were struggling to break free. "Stay with me," she whispered, her hands trembling as they gripped his arm. She could feel the power of the curse swelling within him, but she refused to let go. She wouldn't lose him, not now. His body was shifting rapidly, his muscles rippling and his hands clawing at the air as he struggled to keep his human form. I can't, Orin gasped, his voice ragged. I can't stop it. Selene's heart clenched as she watched the transformation unfold. But she knew this was the moment they had both been waiting for. The moment when they would either break the curse together, or let it consume them. You can, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. We can. I'm here, Orin. We're in this together. She reached out, touching his face, her fingers trembling as they brushed against his skin. For a moment the wildness in his eyes softened, a flicker of recognition flashing in his golden gaze. He reached out, his hand trembling as he cupped her face. Selene, he breathed, his voice soft and filled with raw emotion. I never thought I would find someone like you. The bond between them pulsed, stronger now than ever before, and Selene felt a surge of power wash over her, a warmth spreading through her veins. It was as if her very soul was merging with his, connecting them in ways she had never imagined. I'm not going anywhere, Orin, she whispered, her voice filled with certainty. We're going to fight this together, no matter what. Orin's eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, the beast inside him seemed to quiet, as if it had heard the truth in her words. He closed his eyes, his breath ragged, and when he opened them again, they were no longer filled with the ferocity of the curse, but with something else, something that resembled hope. But just as Selene thought they had a chance, the ground beneath them rumbled once more, and a cold wind howled through the clearing. No. Orin's voice was low and filled with dread. It's not over yet. The beast inside him stirred again, more violently than before, and Selene could feel it, the darkness threatening to overtake them both. She held onto him tighter, her grip firm. It's not over, Orin, she said, her voice fierce with determination. Not while we're still standing. We will break this curse together. Orin's golden eyes flashed with renewed intensity, and he let out a deep primal roar that shook the very air around them. Selene felt her heart race, but she didn't flinch. She had made her choice, and there was no turning back now. The power of the curse surged one last time, and Selene could feel the strength of the bond between them growing even stronger, like a beacon of light pushing back the darkness. I'm not afraid, Selene said, her voice unwavering as she stood by his side. We're stronger than this. Orin's breath steadied, and he turned his gaze to her, his eyes now filled with something more than just the beast. He saw her, truly saw her, and in that moment she knew that they were ready. Together they would face whatever came next, no matter how impossible it seemed. And with that, the curse began to weaken, its hold on Orin loosening as the bond between them grew. The darkness started to recede, the storm inside him finally calming. Orin's transformation slowed, his body returning to its human form, and as the last vestiges of the curse faded away, Selene held on to him, her heart pounding with relief. They had done it. They had broken the curse. But even as they stood there, in the quiet aftermath, Selene knew that their journey was far from over. The challenges they had faced were just the beginning, and the road ahead would be filled with dangers, but for the first time, she felt a deep sense of peace. They were no longer bound by the curse. They were free, and together they would face whatever the future held. The curse had been broken, but Orin and Selene both knew that their journey was far from over. As the days passed, they found themselves in a strange limbo, no longer bound by the curse, but not yet free from the shadows that still loomed over them. Orin, now fully himself, no longer struggled against the beast inside him, but he could feel the weight of the consequences that awaited them. The war that had once raged inside him was over, but there was still the matter of his kingdom, his enemies, and the political chaos that had been brewing while he had been trapped by the curse. We've won, but the war isn't over, Orin said one evening as they stood by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Selene turned to him, her eyes filled with understanding. I know, she said softly, but we've come this far. Together we can face whatever comes next. Orin nodded, but there was a darkness in his eyes, a reminder that the battle wasn't just with the curse. It was with the world that had turned against him. My enemies will come for me, he said, his voice low and heavy. They won't just let me walk back into the throne without a fight. Selene stepped closer to him, her hand resting on his arm. "And you don't have to face them alone," she said, her voice strong. "You have me, Orin. We'll face them together." Orin looked at her, the softness in his gaze betraying the storm that still raged within him. "I don't want to drag you into this," he said, his voice strained. "You've already done so much for me." Selene's expression remained steady, unyielding. "You're not dragging me into anything. I'm here because I choose to be. And if we're going to rebuild your kingdom, if we're going to stand against your enemies, we need to do it together." Orin's heart ached as he looked at her, the weight of his responsibility pressing heavily on his shoulders. For so long he had been alone in this fight, but now for the first time, he realized that he didn't have to carry the burden by himself. Selene was right. Together they were stronger. "Then we begin tomorrow," he said, his voice filled with determination. The next few days were spent preparing, gathering allies, and forming a plan. Orin's enemies were many, and they were powerful. But Orin had something they didn't. Selene. The bond they shared, the strength they drew from each other, would be the key to overcoming the trials ahead. They made their way to the capital, the heart of Orin's kingdom, where he had once ruled with an iron fist. The city was bustling with activity, but there was a palpable tension in the air, a reminder that Orin's return would not be welcomed by everyone. As they entered the grand hall of the palace, Orin's presence seemed to command the attention of every soul in the room. The nobles, the courtiers, the soldiers, all turned to face him, their expressions ranging from disbelief to fear. "The Alpha King returns," one of the courtiers whispered, her voice barely audible, but loud enough for Orin to hear. He ignored her, his gaze sweeping over the room. "I'm back," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "And I'm not leaving." The room fell into a stunned silence, but Selene could feel the tension rising around them. She stepped forward, her presence by his side a silent declaration that they were united, that they were a force to be reckoned with. "We will take back what is ours," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. Orin turned to her, his gaze softening as he reached for her hand. "Together," he said, the word a promise. As the tension in the room continued to mount, one of the nobles stepped forward, his face a mask of false politeness. "Your Majesty," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I must admit, I did not expect to see you again. I trust you realize the position you've put yourself in. The kingdom has moved on. It is no longer yours to command." Orin's eyes narrowed, and Selene could feel the heat of his anger rising, but she placed a hand on his arm, steadying him. "We haven't come to fight for control," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We've come to reclaim what was stolen from us. The kingdom belongs to its people, not to those who would seek to exploit it for their own gain." The noble's face reddened with rage, but he held his tongue. Orin stepped forward, his posture regal and commanding. "I will fight for my people," he said, his voice filled with authority. "And if any of you stand in my way, you will face the consequences." The room remained silent, the weight of Orin's words settling over everyone present. Selene stood by his side, her heart beating fast, but her resolve unshaken. Together they would face whatever challenges awaited them, and they would do it as equals, as partners. The future of the kingdom depended on them both, and neither of them would back down. The fight for Orin's throne had only just begun, but Selene knew one thing for certain. They would face it together, no matter the cost. The palace was filled with an electric tension as Orin and Selene prepared to face the council of nobles who had long thought of his reign as a thing of the past. Every step they took toward the grand chamber felt heavier, as if the weight of his former kingdom bore down on them both. But with each stride, Orin's resolve solidified. His return to the throne was no longer a matter of reclaiming power. It was about restoring justice and protecting the people who had suffered in his absence. As they entered the grand hall, Orin's presence commanded attention. The nobles, once whispering among themselves, now fell silent, their gazes shifting between him and the woman who stood by his side. Selene, her head held high, stood firm beside him, her hand lightly gripping his, a silent but powerful statement of unity. Orin's eyes swept over the room, each noble's face a mask of curiosity, fear or defiance. It was clear they were not expecting him to return, let alone come with such conviction. He stepped to the center of the room, the weight of centuries of rule pressing down on his shoulders, but his gaze never wavered. "I have returned," Orin's voice rang out, strong and sure, filling every corner of the hall. "And I will not leave until the kingdom is restored to its rightful place." The air in the room was thick with disbelief. Some of the nobles shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly unsettled by his confidence. Others exchanged cautious glances, unsure of how to respond to the Alpha King, who had once ruled with both respect and fear. One of the more prominent figures, Lord Viren, a man with a reputation for playing both sides, stood up, his voice dripping with condescension. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing slightly though his tone was far from respectful, "it is clear you have made your presence known, but I must ask, what makes you believe you can simply take back what has already been claimed by others?" Orin's eyes locked with Lord Viren's, his expression cold and unyielding. "What has been taken from me," he said, his voice low but filled with unwavering authority, "was never theirs to claim. This kingdom belongs to its people, not to a handful of power-hungry men." The room fell into a heavy silence as Orin's words settled in, the truth hanging in the air like a blade ready to fall. Selene stepped forward, her voice calm but fierce. "The time for lies and manipulation is over," she said, her gaze sweeping over the nobles, who now turned their attention to her. "We stand here today not as conquerors, but as those who will rebuild this kingdom from the ashes. We will restore honor, justice, and fairness to those who have suffered for too long." Her words struck a chord with some of the onlookers. A few of the younger nobles nodded, their faces filled with a mix of hope and curiosity. Orin could see that Selene's presence was having an effect on them, stirring something they had long buried. A longing for change, for a ruler who would fight for the people. But there were those who would never accept this, who would fight tooth and nail to keep their grip on power. As if on cue, another voice rose from the back of the room, this one much harsher, filled with disdain. "You think you can simply waltz back in and claim what's mine?" It was Lady Thessa, a woman who had once been one of Orin's most trusted advisors, but who had quickly turned against him when his rule faltered. "You are nothing more than a broken king, a ghost from the past, and you will never rule this kingdom again." Her words were sharp, calculated, meant to wound, and Orin could feel the venom in her tone. The nobles who had once followed her whispered among themselves, their eyes flickering between Orin and Lady Thessa. Selene's grip on Orin's hand tightened, but she did not flinch. "You are wrong, Lady Thessa," Orin said, his voice steady and calm, despite the storm raging inside him. "I am not a ghost. I am very much alive, and I will not be silenced or dismissed. This kingdom belongs to the people, not to a few who seek to manipulate it for their own gain." Orin's words were like a challenge thrown into the heart of the room, and as the silence grew heavy once more, the nobles knew that this was no longer a matter of royal succession. This was a fight for the soul of the kingdom itself. "You may not like it, Lady Thessa," Selene added, her eyes hard as she faced the woman who had once been a trusted ally of Orin, "but you cannot stop the will of the people. This kingdom will be rebuilt, and we will do it together." The tension in the room was palpable as the two women locked eyes, but it was Orin who broke the silence. "We will face challenges," he said, his voice strong and resolute. "But together we will overcome them. I will not be alone in this fight." There was no turning back now. Orin had made his declaration, and the room was filled with a quiet, palpable sense of change in the air. Whether they liked it or not, the future of the kingdom was now in their hands, and nothing would stop them from reclaiming what was rightfully theirs. The palace was filled with an electric tension as Orin and Selene prepared to face the council of nobles who had long thought of his reign as a thing of the past. Every step they took toward the grand chamber felt heavier, as if the weight of his former kingdom bore down on them both. But with each stride Orin's resolve solidified. His return to the throne was no longer a matter of reclaiming power. It was about restoring justice and protecting the people who had suffered in his absence. As they entered the grand hall, Orin's presence commanded attention. The nobles, once whispering among themselves, now fell silent, their gazes shifting between him and the woman who stood by his side. Selene, her head held high, stood firm beside him, her hand lightly gripping his, a silent but powerful statement of unity. Orin's eyes swept over the room, each noble's face a mask of curiosity, fear, or defiance. It was clear they were not expecting him to return, let alone come with such conviction. He stepped to the center of the room, the weight of centuries of rule pressing down on his shoulders, but his gaze never wavered. I have returned. Orin's voice rang out, strong and sure, filling every corner of the hall. And I will not leave until the kingdom is restored to its rightful place. The air in the room was thick with disbelief. Some of the nobles shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly unsettled by his confidence. Others exchanged cautious glances, unsure of how to respond to the Alpha King, who had once ruled with both respect and fear. One of the more prominent figures, Lord Viren, a man with a reputation for playing both sides, stood up, his voice dripping with condescension. Your Majesty, he said, bowing slightly though his tone was far from respectful, it is clear you have made your presence known, but I must ask, what makes you believe you can simply take back what has already been claimed by others? Orin's eyes locked with Lord Viren's, his expression cold and unyielding. What has been taken from me, he said, his voice low but filled with unwavering authority, was never theirs to claim. This kingdom belongs to its people, not to a handful of power-hungry men. The room fell into a heavy silence as Orin's words settled in, the truth hanging in the air like a blade ready to fall. Selene stepped forward, her voice calm but fierce. The time for lies and manipulation is over, she said, her gaze sweeping over the nobles who now turned their attention to her. We stand here today not as conquerors, but as those who will rebuild this kingdom from the ashes. We will restore honor, justice, and fairness to those who have suffered for too long. Her words struck a chord with some of the onlookers. A few of the younger nobles nodded, their faces filled with a mix of hope and curiosity. Orin could see that Selene's presence was having an effect on them, stirring something they had long buried. A longing for change, for a ruler who would fight for the people. But there were those who would never accept this, who would fight tooth and nail to keep their grip on power. As if on cue, another voice rose from the back of the room, this one much harsher, filled with disdain. You think you can simply waltz back in and claim what's mine? It was Lady Thessa, a woman who had once been one of Orin's most trusted advisors, but who had quickly turned against him when his rule faltered. You are nothing more than a broken king, a ghost from the past, and you will never rule this kingdom again. Her words were sharp, calculated, meant to wound, and Orin could feel the venom in her tone. The nobles who had once followed her whispered among themselves, their eyes flickering between Orin and Lady Thessa. Selene's grip on Orin's hand tightened, but she did not flinch. You are wrong, Lady Thessa, Orin said, his voice steady and calm, despite the storm raging inside him. I am not a ghost. I am very much alive, and I will not be silenced or dismissed. This kingdom belongs to the people, not to a few who seek to manipulate it for their own gain. Orin's words were like a challenge thrown into the heart of the room, and as the silence grew heavy once more, the nobles knew that this was no longer a matter of royal succession. This was a fight for the soul of the kingdom itself. You may not like it, Lady Thessa, Selene added, her eyes hard as she faced the woman who had once been a trusted ally of Orin, but you cannot stop the will of the people. This kingdom will be rebuilt, and we will do it together. The tension in the room was palpable as the two women locked eyes, but it was Orin who broke the silence. We will face challenges, he said, his voice strong and resolute. But together we will overcome them. I will not be alone in this fight. There was no turning back now. Orin had made his declaration, and the room was filled with a quiet, palpable sense of change in the air. Whether they liked it or not, the future of the kingdom was now in their hands, and nothing would stop them from reclaiming what was rightfully theirs. As the final moments of the council meeting passed, a heavy silence settled over the grand hall. Orin stood tall, his heart pounding in his chest, knowing that the road ahead would be anything but easy. The nobles had been divided, but the seed of change had been planted, and it was undeniable. There were whispers of rebellion, of support for the former ruling class, but for the first time Orin felt a shift in the air, a realization that things would never be the same again. Beside him Selene stood unwavering, her presence a steady anchor in the storm of uncertainty. She had been his strength, his guiding light, and as they faced the future together, he knew that no matter the obstacles they would overcome them. This is just the beginning, Orin said, his voice firm as he addressed the council. We will rebuild, but it will take time. The kingdom must heal from the wounds of the past. He turned to Selene, her eyes filled with a mix of determination and hope. "We will do this together," she said softly, her hand brushing against his. Her words were more than a promise. They were a vow, a bond that could never be broken. The room fell into quiet contemplation, and for a brief moment, Orin allowed himself to imagine a future where peace and prosperity reigned once more, where the scars of the past could be healed, and where the people of his kingdom would thrive. But deep down he knew that there would always be challenges, that some would never accept his rule, that others would seek to undo everything he had fought for. As he looked around the room, Orin could see the shifting allegiances, the uncertainty in the eyes of those who had once supported the old regime. He knew that he could not trust them all, but he also knew that he could not fight this battle alone. "There will be more who test us," Orin said, his voice carrying the weight of the truth. "But I am no longer the king who ruled from fear. I will rule with justice, with compassion, and with the people by my side." He turned his gaze to the nobles who had dared to challenge him, his eyes hardening with resolve. "And if any of you choose to stand against us, know this: your rebellion will not go unanswered. I will fight for this kingdom, for its people, and for the future we are building." The tension in the room was palpable, and for a long moment, it seemed as though the entire hall was holding its breath. But then slowly a ripple of applause spread through the crowd, hesitant at first but growing in strength. It wasn't the roaring approval Orin had once received, but it was something. It was a start. Selene's hand remained firmly in his, a silent affirmation of the bond they shared. "Together," she whispered once more. The council session ended, but the real work had only just begun. Orin and Selene left the hall, their hearts still heavy with the weight of the decisions they had made. But there was a quiet sense of determination in the air. They had faced their first battle and won, but there would be many more to come. As they walked through the palace corridors, Orin's mind raced with plans for the future, the steps they would need to take to solidify his rule, and ensure that the people of the kingdom could trust him once again. He had never asked for this responsibility, but now that it was his, he would fight to the very end to protect it. The road ahead was fraught with challenges, but for the first time, Orin felt a sense of peace. He was not alone. Selene was with him, and together, they would rebuild the kingdom, restore justice, and create a future where the darkness of the past could finally be put to rest. As they stood at the edge of the palace balcony, looking out over the city, Orin wrapped his arm around Selene, pulling her close. "We will do this, Selene," he said softly, his voice filled with quiet strength. "Together we will bring the change this kingdom needs." Selene leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder as she looked out over the city with him. For the first time in a long time she felt a sense of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, their love and their determination could change the course of history. Together they would face whatever came next, side by side, their hearts and their destinies intertwined forever.